Dennis DeVerne is with us. His new book, Goodbye Natalie, Goodbye Splendor. Dennis, what happened that night? Was there an argument on the yacht?
Yes, that night there was an argument that actually started the day before, but that particular night in the afternoon, Christopher Walken and Natalie, they had gone ashore to a restaurant, which was the only restaurant on that part of the island. And the tension was building throughout the whole weekend of Robert Wagner being jealous of Christopher Walken. And that afternoon, Robert Wagner and myself, we joined Christopher and Natalie at the restaurant for dinner. And we had dinner, we had drinks. Robert Wagner said it was time to return to the boat. Natalie, we all kind of wanted to stay a little longer, but RJ said, no, we're going to go back to the boat. So we all went back to the boat. I tied the dinghy up on the swim platform with a bow line and a stern line. And we all went inside the boat and opened a bottle of wine, put the kettle on for some tea, because now they like to have tea before she went to bed. And the jealousy was just getting so tense that Robert Wagner had picked up the bottle of wine and smashed it right in front of Natalie and Christopher on the coffee table. And at that moment, Christopher stood up and he went directly to his stateroom. And that was the last I've seen of him for that whole night. At that point, Natalie was devastated, and she went into her stateroom, and Robert Wagner had followed. And they were arguing in the stateroom.
That night, Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood, ferocious fight going on. You turned up your music so they would not think in your mind that you were eavesdropping or trying to hear them, but you did hear them.
Yeah, yes, I did. And I kept the music going, but I could still hear the arguing. And then the arguing went on to the aft deck, and moments later, everything became silent. So I thought that maybe they were making up and maybe they were going to go to bed and that was going to be the end of it. So I waited for a little while and I still had the music on, and I decided, well, I'm going to go down below and I'm going to go to the aft deck and just see if everything's okay. Well, Robert Wagner was standing there, leaning his back against the back of the boat, facing the boat, and he said that Natalie was missing and would I go search the boat. So I immediately went to my stateroom, thinking that maybe she went to my stateroom because she felt maybe that she was safe there, because the night before, Natalie and I had gone ashore and we stayed at a hotel because there was arguing the day before as well. So I came back and I told Robert Wagner that Natalie was nowhere on the boat. I looked in Christopher's stateroom, I looked in the other empty stateroom, and she wasn't there. So I said to Robert Wagner, he said to me, he said, the dinghy is gone too. Well, I just knew that Natalie was so deathly afraid of the water and not really capable of taking that boat by herself. But he said the boat was gone and she was gone. So I thought, well, let's turn on the searchlight and let's just see if we can see her. So after that, it was like he said no.
Now, you said that evening there had been a heated argument between Wood and her husband, Robert Wagner, that you came aboard, above the aft, and you observed Wagner leaned back against the wall, and he at that time said Natalie Wood was gone. You searched everywhere. You couldn't find her. Why did you believe that she may be in the state cabin? Why did you think that she would go there?
Well, I thought that maybe she would go into my stateroom because the night before, Robert Wagner wanted to make the decision to move the boat at night, which Natalie did not want to do. The weather was raining, cold, windy, and not a very good idea. Natalie refused and decided that she wanted to go ashore. So that night before, I had taken Natalie ashore in Avalon, and we stayed at a hotel for that night. And we returned to the boat the next day, hoping that things would be a little smoother. So Natalie and I, we returned back to the boat, and she made a nice breakfast, and then we moved the boat to the other part of the island where there was just only one restaurant. And
why did Robert Wagner want to move the boat, Dennis?
I can't answer that. I don't know why, because it wasn't a very, very good idea. Maybe he was angry and he wasn't sure what quite to do or what. I'm not sure, but it was definitely not the thing to do.
Dennis, you stated that an argument had been brewing for days. What was the argument about?
Well, it wasn't so much verbal, but it was just the tension that was going on the whole time between Robert Wagner, Natalie, and Christopher. It was just getting to a boiling point.
That evening, after you searched the boat, you could not find Natalie Wood. What happened next?
Well, I went back to Robert Wagner and said she was nowhere on the boat. And I said, let's turn on the searchlight. We had a very big searchlight. And I said, let's turn on the searchlight to see if we could see her. And he says, we're not going to do that. He said, no. And I said, well, let's call the restaurant. He said, we're not going to do that either. So we stood there, and I was just devastated. I think I was actually in shock. And Robert Wagner poured me a drink, and it was like it was like torture that was going on. And after a couple hours, I said, we have to call the restaurant. So we called the restaurant, and right after that, the people from the restaurant came out to the boat, and they said that we should call the Coast Guard. We need to call the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard was contacted, and they were going to start doing their search. And by now, it's getting daylight, and they came back to the boat, and they say they found Natalie Wood's body floating, and the dinghy was somewhat nearby her.